what can the world expect from 2022?
Well, I think the one thing that is certain is uncertainty. I'm not sure anyone can really predict what we're going to expect, because the trajectory of this virus, it has been so uncertain. And because we've not cracked the way to solve the problem for the whole world, that breeds the uncertainty. So for me, 2022, I hope it will be better than 2021, in the sense that we are discovering there are more medicines. We now have the Pfizer pill that has just come out that could help. So I hope there'll be more discoveries of cures, or, you know, medical goods and supplies, medical countermeasures that can help us manage the virus, particularly the Omicron that is spreading so fast. That's the one good part. I hope we can do that. If we can manage that, and we can vaccinate 70% of people, or find pills that we can distribute to them by the middle of next year, then we will have more certainty of a sustainable economic recovery. You've seen that the minute a new variant comes, it spreads, there are lockdowns, the economy is heavily impacted, and poor people all over the world are the ones most impacted. So for next year, 2022, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that things will improve, but really all I can tell you is uncertainty. Now, we look at the projections we have for economic growth next year. You know, for 2021, the IMF has projected almost 6% economic growth for this year, although that is now probably dampened by the emergence of Omicron. They're projecting almost 5% globally next year. For Africa, I think we're a little bit behind, 4% this year and almost 4%. I think it's 3.7 or 8 next year. Nigeria is around the 2% range, so it's even below that of Africa and the world. So those are the projections now, and I hope that at the minimum we can hold on to that, and that we don't go into a recession or contraction of economic growth, because that would really be very, very harmful all around for the world economy, and particularly for our continent and our country. The trajectory of global trade, according to our projections at the WTO, mirror what we say with respect to economic growth. So this year, our projections show a robust recovery of 10.8%. The third quarter figures we just received show a dampening of this. I think emergence of Omicron and others, and all the emerging new measures are probably putting a damper on the recovery. We projected about a 4%, I think it's 4.7% recovery next year. And so that is lower. And if we have a continuation of the virus, then that we could again see a dampening of this recovery. So it's very difficult really to say exactly what is going to happen because of the uncertainty that I talked about. But we are hoping that if some countries are recovering faster than others, the ones that are not recovering as fast can tap into the external trade of these countries in order to help pull up their own recovery. So that's what we have to look at, because what you see is a divergent recovery. You know, the rich countries are recovering faster because they have the fiscal stimulus to their economies, the fiscal resources, and they have access to vaccines. The poorer countries, and our continent in particular, is recovering more slowly. There's this K-shaped recovery more slowly because we don't have the access to vaccines we should have, and we also don't have the fiscal space that we need in order to stimulate our economies. So this divergent recovery is what we need to battle. And if we don't find a way to solve the vaccine problem, I fear we might see even more divergence next year.
we are still very much in the middle of a pandemic, one that has had a huge human cost across the world. But if we look at countries and regions specifically, we've got the likes of the United States, United Kingdom, most of mainland Europe, who have been able to inoculate their populations at a far greater rate than countries in the developing world, Nigeria being one of them. When you look at issues like vaccine nationalism, companies not wanting to share their patents, what do you think needs to be done about that? And more specifically, what is the World Trade Organization doing to remedy that situation?
Vaccine nationalism is self-defeating. And I've been very clear about that. The fact that 66% of people in rich countries have been vaccinated, and only 8% in Africa, for instance, I've always felt is not acceptable morally, practically, and economically, because we cannot have a sustainable economic recovery of the world until we've vaccinated at least 70% by the middle of next year, as the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros, the target they set up. And the fact that, yes, we have third booster shots now, and now they're even fourth, there's a fourth set of shots being given to vulnerable people in Israel. At the same, and from the point of view maybe of the politics of each country, you understand why the policymakers want to do this. But at the end of the day, if we don't meet this target, if we don't solve vaccine inequity, we will just be in a self-defeating cycle, simply because new variants are going to turn up, and then we'll need fifth and sixth. So I think the world should stand back and really think about how we are going to handle this from a global perspective, not just from a national perspective. So that's the first point. And from the perspective of the World Trade Organization, ever since I got there, we've really made a great deal of effort to try and see how trade and the WTO itself can contribute to this issue of vaccines. And there are really three ways. One is to make sure that the supply chains of companies that produce these vaccines flow freely. Because at the end of the day, if we don't up the production, we will not have enough to distribute and enough to get into arms of people anywhere. So we focused on reducing the export restrictions. When I first arrived, there were about 119 export restrictions. We're now down to 45. And supply chains are flowing more freely. So I think that is something very important to focus on. The second thing we've done is to work with the vaccine manufacturers themselves for two things. One, to make sure that indeed we work closely with them to identify problems in their supply chain and make sure that nothing blocks production and distribution. But the second part of that is to make sure that they decentralize manufacturing. For Africa, for instance, even for Nigeria, there is no reason why a country with more than 200 million people like ours should not have capacity to manufacture its own vaccines. There is no reason why a continent of 1.3 billion people should be importing 99% of vaccines. So encouraging these manufacturers to invest in our continent has been a very big part of what the WTO has been doing quietly behind the scenes, and it's been working. And I think we must give credit to the continent itself, because our presidents have been out front, fighting for this investment themselves. We've had the Africa Vaccine Task Force and the Vaccine Manufacturing Task Force. So they too have been working, and this is been helping them to try and get this. So that's a second thing we've done. The third place where we are now struggling to also contribute is what you raised with regard to the issue of intellectual property and patents, where there's an agreement at the World Trade Organization that governs the way that patents are used in the world. And so about 100 plus developing countries have come forward, members, saying they want a waiver. There are some other countries, mainly developed, who feel that this will not give rise to quick access to vaccines and will disincentivize innovation and research. So the two sides, they're both members. What I'm trying to do in particular, is to bring the two sides together. And it's been the attempt to get them to negotiate and to come to a common agreement that can be acceptable to all sides has been going. It was going on for almost a year before I came. We've been struggling since, but I just want to say there are very good informal talks going on now, and I hope that that will lead to a good compromise solution. Again, I say when you're in a negotiating forum, no one side is going to get 100%, but hopefully we are going to get an agreement that will serve those people in the developing world, as well as allay the fears of people in the rich countries who think that this may be damaging. So we're working towards it even as we speak. I was up last night at 4 a.m., on the same issue, trying to work with people on both sides.
The Africa Continental Free Trade Area is an agreement obviously not directly drawn up by the World Trade Organization, but one that seeks to improve trade across the African continent. What are your thoughts on that trade deal, and what can, again, the world expect from the World Trade Organization along those lines?
Well, if we, first of all, with respect to the global trade for Africa, as I said, our numbers show a slower recovery than you see for the rest of the world. Asia is showing a very fast recovery, and Europe and North America, but Africa, the Middle East and South America slower than that. So that's globally. Now, with respect to the African Continental Free Trade Area, I think this is one of the best agreements we could have. And even though I have to say that, to get there, there was a lot of work with the WTO. So most of the principles and rules that underlie the Africa Continental Free Trade Area are based on WTO rules. So, and we continue to work with them and the Secretariat in Accra, with respect to capacity building. We're working with individual countries. When I say we, I mean the WTO is working with them. I think that this is something that is a huge plus for us on the continent, and we need to do all that is necessary to make sure we tap into this positive aspect. If you have a market of 1.3 billion consumers, it means that we can really look inwards and say, how can we add value to the products which we export? We tend to export raw materials outside. How can we add value to them and sell to each other? How do we specialize so that not every country is producing the same thing? How do we, for instance, even open up new industries that we don't have, like this pharmaceutical industry? We could have a situation in which we are manufacturing medicines, vaccines, and different countries have different aspects of the supply chain. They're manufacturing different things that we can all put together. So it's quite exciting if you think about the potential for us to do things, to add value to products, to diversify our economies, to be better able to sell to each other, to digitize trade. Trade is going digital, and it's one of the most exciting things happening that can make trade flow faster. E-commerce is here to stay, and we can tap into all of this within the Africa Continental Free Trade. And I'm glad to say we are. If you look at what is being done there, they're moving on the path of digitization. I think one of the other things that we need to watch is how we open our borders. So we need to also physically, even if we're digitizing, we need to physically make sure that our borders are open so that not just people but goods can flow freely. And that now that's not so much the case. So those are some of the things we really, really need to work hard at if we have to reap the benefits of the African Continental Free Trade Area. But I think it's one of the best things we could do. It will help us increase our trade internally, but also externally as we specialize between countries. The Services Domestic Regulation Agreement, which has been signed by about 65 members of the WTO. And this is a very important agreement because it seeks to make it easier, the regulations, the red tape in the way of services provision and services trade within countries, for that to be minimized and to fall away so that this can be made easy. And you know, services trade is the wave of the future. Services trade before the pandemic was growing faster than goods trade. So having this kind of agreement where countries have said that they will do away with the red tape, the regulatory strictures that line the way of services trade is a very good thing. And the OECD and the WTO, we've estimated that this could easily lead to $150 billion annually in cost savings for those who belong to this agreement. I think that the key is to get many more countries to join. We would like, there are 164 members of the WTO. We've got the 65 plus members who have signed the agreement, and over time, hopefully more will join and benefit from it. So this is quite significant.
Well, I'd like our conversation to take a bit of a personal turn now. If you were to look at your vast professional career and look at the many successful moments you've had, what would you say is the proudest moment you've experienced?
When people ask me my proudest, what I've done, proudest thing in life, I usually say my children. I'm enormously happy and proud at how they've turned out. Let me quote Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, whom we interviewed. There's a recent book I just wrote with Julia Gillard, the former Prime Minister of Australia, called Women and Leadership, Real Lives, Real Lessons. And she was one of the leaders we interviewed, and she said, there's nothing like balance. I just make it work. So I think that that's the reality. You find a way to make it work by making sure you have the cooperation within the family circle, meaning your spouse has to believe in what you're doing and believe in you. Your children have to understand. And so from a very young age, we've always been, you know, talking to our children almost as if they are grown-ups, to explain to them what we're doing, the need for them to pitch in at home. You can see there is no way you're going to make it if you don't have, especially if you're working abroad where you don't have much help, you know. So children were brought up to help, to understand the value of their father's job, their mother's job, and their need to help. And I think that helped a lot. Then I have a very supportive family. I have siblings who are very supportive, mother, father, who totally understand. And that was very helpful. So I have to say, in that way, I was also blessed because there are people who understood what I was trying to do and pitched in whenever they could to help out. So that's how we managed. So I don't know about balance, but we made it work, like Jacinda said. But with respect to my professional career, I would say that there's not only one proud moment. I've been particularly blessed, I would say, and I give thanks to God for everything, because you don't just achieve on your own. But I would say one very proud moment is getting rid of the $30 billion debt for Nigeria. When I was finance minister under President Obasanjo, that had been his dream, to get rid of Nigeria's debt, and he gave us a charge to do that. And with the economic team that he put together and I was the head of, we were able to work really hard and negotiating away that $30 billion, unleashed growth within our economy. We were able to go from something like 2.3% per annum growth rate to 6%. We almost tripled growth. And that was, to me, a phenomenal achievement. And you could see how the economy progressed after that. So that's a proud moment. Another one, as a managing director of the World Bank, was when I led the negotiations for IDA, the International Development Association, the soft loan or soft credit arm of the World Bank that lends to the poorest countries at sometimes grants or very low interest rates. And for the first time, we almost hit $50 billion. We were able to raise $49.5 billion. That was a proud moment because that was raising resources for countries that are the poorest and need it, and many of them on our own continent. Another proud moment was when I was chair of the board of Gavi, and we were able to, I led the board to agree to stockpile Ebola vaccines. Remember how so many people died on our continent in Liberia and Guinea, Sierra Leone. in DRC from Ebola. There was no vaccine. As soon as one was experimentally proven, there was a lot of debate. Okay, still not really 100% approved. It's experimental, but it works. Should we stockpile it? And getting the board to agree of the Global Vaccine Alliance, Gavi, that I was chair of, to stockpile that. And subsequently, people don't know, when the Ebola reappeared in DRC, it was these vaccines that WHO used to be able to take care of that. Malaria vaccines we also approved, and approved piloting of malaria vaccines, which are now available. So there are many proud moments, and of course, Director General of the WTO, maybe. I want to wait until we achieve many more results at the WTO. I'm very excited by the potential to contribute to the pandemic, which we have been doing in a very good way. But I will wait when we've achieved more results, and I'll come back to that to see. But you can see, I'm really happy, I'm lucky, I've been able to. It's a blessing when you're able to achieve something and give back. It's not something I take for granted. It's an opportunity to serve.
Conversely, on the other side, what about a moment that has been most regrettable in your professional career? What would that be?
Regretted. Well, there have been very tough moments in my professional career, so I don't want people to get the impression that every day you woke up and it was all peaches and cream. It certainly was not. I went through very tough times in my career as well. And that's another story. But obviously, I think one of them, and people in Nigeria have heard this repeatedly, so I don't want to keep talking about it, but people keep asking me these questions about what was the worst moment or the one you regret. It's not that I regretted, but I mean, it was a very bad moment when my mother was kidnapped. While I was finance minister the second time, as we were trying to fight corruption among the oil marketers. And, President Jonathan had been very supportive in terms of trying to clean up the corruption in that sector. And we tried to do it, and the consequence was kidnap of my mother when we refused to pay $2.45 billion that was fraudulent, which audits had shown. But I've told that story so many times, so I don't want to bore people, but I don't know any more terrible time in my life that I can refer to than that. I'm just sitting here with all thanks to God that my mother was able to escape and is still alive today to tell the tale. It could have been otherwise. And at that moment, yes, I was saying to myself, if this, you don't want to be working and have something impact your parents because of what you're doing. So yeah, I was asking myself, oh my God, being finance minister at this time. But my father was very supportive, the president was supportive. We were able to pull through it, the entire family, but it was a very terrible time for us, very terrible.
2023 is gearing up to be a very interesting year. Of course, it is going to be the year that Nigeria elects a new president. When we look at that time, it's an interesting situation because for the first time in a long time, it's very difficult to identify who the next president will be. Of course, names are being thrown into the ring, and your name has been thrown in many times. And if you were to take that position, hypothetically speaking, it would make you the first woman president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. How does that make you feel?
First of all, if I'd known you would raise that, I wouldn't even have given you this interview. And I'm glad you said hypothetically. So in real life, I'm doing this job. And I think, let me just say that I wish for the country good leadership. I think everybody knows I love that country. Sometimes I ask myself, how come? But I do. I love the country. It's in me. It's in you. It's in all of us who are Nigerian. And I would want to have good leadership because the potential for Nigeria to really do great things is something that I can see, breathe. think it's within reach. When something is within reach. So yes, it would be good to have someone good run the country. I'm running the WTO. I just got there. I'm focusing on the important issues there. You can see I'm excited about the potential for doing that. But that doesn't mean I don't wish good leadership for our country, so that the youth, I'm quite concerned about young people not having jobs, poverty, we need to really work on those issues. So we need to focus on that. And, the pandemic is probably making things more difficult because a lot of people are not working. It's difficult to be out there earning your daily living, as many of us have to do in the markets every day. People have to go, and when you have all these strictures, it's a bit difficult. So let's look forward to a time. Let's look forward to good leadership, to a good 2022, a good 2023 for our young people, and by the way, for our women. Nigerian women are awesome. When I look at them, I see some of the young women, some of the older women who are doing so much, and I love it. It gives me a lot of energy. Many of them are doing good things at home, abroad, and so on. And that doesn't mean I don't appreciate the men. I do. But I also want to give a shout out to the women, because they do so much. Nigerian women, African women are multitaskers.